of Connecticut General Statutes, the penalty for planning and zoning must be established by town ordinance. So do we need to establish new ordinances for the new regulations?
Not in its current state.
I'm sorry?
No. The way we like to run the meeting is if you have a comment to make or you have a concern, if you can pose it as a statement rather than a question. But in answering your question, we don't need ordinances per se to address the items in draft form of the zoning regulations currently.
No, I'm talking about the penalties, because it really doesn't sort of discuss what the penalties for all of this is. And so
It does not require an ordinance.
it does not require, well, the state statute in dash 12 says it does. So that's why I was just wondering okay.
Duly noted.
And if it is required by ordinance and the ordinance doesn't pass, then where do we stand as far as enforcing this? And the concern of mine is the enforcement piece of this and the tracking piece of this. This is a huge document with a lot of things, from controlling your pets to where you park stuff on your land to it's going to impact pretty much everyone. So how are we going to enforce this without any additional cost to the taxpayer? And if that's the case, then it's the taxpayer that's incurring the cost to regulate itself. So that's a big issue. We don't have zoning enforcement. We don't enforce the regulations that we have now. And so we don't put money towards enforcement. So why have all these regulations if we can't enforce this? That's really the point. And what was the driving force behind all of this? I don't really understand why controlling for domestic pets has anything to do with zoning and planning. So I'm trying to understand where a lot of this came from. Is this a plan that was adopted somewhere else that we sort of, took from bits and places? Or was there complaints that drove this? Like, where did this sort of come from?
I understand your comment. It's an open-ended question, June. It came from so many sources, and of course we had the guidance of somebody who has helped other towns and other municipalities with zoning regulations. So there's obviously a lot that goes into the 136 pages. Sounds like you maybe haven't digested all of the 136 pages, right?
Digested a good amount that pretty much is going to limit a lot of what residents can do on their own land and where they can park things, what they can own, what they can plant. I mean, it's pretty specific. And how are you going to regulate that? That's a concern.
Thank you. Pam, is it Karina? Forgive me if I didn't pronounce your name right.
That's okay. Nobody does.
Nobody does?
Nobody does. I live at 63 Burr Street. Thank you all for being here. I've been here for 26 years, and for everything that I've done with my own personal property, I've gone down to town hall and said, this is what I'm doing. Is there anything I need to know? I've asked the questions. And I read this 136-page document, and I went, holy crap. Like, for instance, I have horses. I just put up a little 2-stall barn. And I went down and I got a permit, and they came and they approved it. But somewhere in here, somebody told me I haven't found it. So maybe you can tell me if it's in here. That I have to have my horse paddocks 40 feet away from my property line? Is that true?
There are a myriad of examples of what may or may not apply. So
Well, I'm just asking if it's in here and if you can tell me where it is, because I was told it is.
There is a number of criteria that depends on how to answer that. So it's not a...
Such as?
It's not... Look, you've stated your concern. I understand that. I don't know your specific situation. So you've got a concern about a setback for boarding of horses?
No, they're my own personal. I didn't see anywhere in here where it says anything about hobby animals, hobby farms, my neighbors in front of me have chickens and goats. They are not set back their chicken pen is right on the property line. Some of my horse paddocks, which I first went to the town maybe see, I've been here 26 years, so maybe 24 years ago, when I brought my horses over, and I showed what brought my plot plan, said this is what I'm doing, they said you're fine. So I was fine. This, things that I read in here and things that people have told me, said I'm not fine if this passes.
Well, I don't know who those people are, so.
Well, I haven't had time to, I'm gonna be honest, I have not digested this 136 pages, it's a lot.
But you are expressing a possible concern about the setback requirements for those who have horses, that they own on their own
Horses,
property.
chickens, goats, like, I don't have all of these animals, but I know there's a lot of small farms, it's one of the reasons I moved to Easton. I love my animals. That brings up the second concern. What does it mean that I can only have 4 domestic animals? What exactly does that mean? Because I don't understand it. And I'm not trying to be flip with you, I'm just trying to get an understanding of where you're going with this, because I own more than 4 horses. I have chickens, I have dogs, I have a turtle, I have 2 adult kids living at home. I mean, I'm really confused by this, and I apologize for not being at earlier meetings. I wasn't aware of it. I guess I was a little bit too busy working as a single mom. But if you're telling me now all of a sudden I can only have 4 animals, what do I do?
So I think in general, what we've done is we've recognized the importance of agriculture in Easton. And I can say that certainly we have broadened the consideration and what people can and cannot do as it relates to a farm or agriculture.
But I'm not a farm.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. That also applies to horses, so I don't know what your specific situation is, but I'm sure if you wanted some input, and you came with a plot plan, and you came with your personal circumstance, I'm sure someone at the town hall would be happy to address it. We have a part-time land use planner. Margaret is pretty good at knowing where to point people, so that option's available for you.
So you're saying that what I should do to answer my questions in this 136-page document is go...
I'm suggesting you do
Can I
anything.
finish my sentence? That I should go back to the town and ask them the
No.
same questions that I already asked and say, okay, you said it was okay, am I still okay?
I'm just suggesting if you personally would like some clarity on that, you're welcome to come to the land use department. I'm not suggesting you do anything. If you've approached this commission and had some concerns, unaware of your specific situation, if you'd like to satisfy those potential concerns, you can come to the land use department. I'm sure they would help.
Okay, I believe I've already been there, but I'm willing to do it again. Home office.
And don't forget, the regulations are draft form right now. They haven't been adopted just yet.
Well, I can't tell what, as June said, that was one of my questions also. Is there some kind of document somewhere that says, okay, this is what we have, this is what we're proposing? Because that would be helpful for people to know if you're okay with this or not okay with this. But I can tell you, going back to the animals, being limited to 4, I'm absolutely against that because I can't live here anymore.
So
And I think it
when
said
you're-
something-
When you're referring to section 3330? That's animals.
Where's my animal? Oh, it's on one of these pages somewhere. I don't know which section because again, it's 136 pages. It's really difficult. I give you guys credit for digesting all this.
Well, I hear your concerns. We'll make sure we take it under consideration.
Okay, home offices, what exactly does that mean? That was another, that do we now, if we're going to operate our own, I'm a bookkeeper. I do a lot of my bookkeeping in my office. I don't really have people come in and out of my home office. Does that mean I need a permit now?
So again, I think what we recognize is that certain home offices, certain uses are appropriate for the town that maybe weren't appropriate in the past. So again, I think if you look at the overall regulations, under certain circumstances, we've allowed for more considerations. Again, your specific situation I'm not familiar with. And again, I think we're not looking to be overly restricted with the regulations. Perhaps we acknowledge certain things that might be in the town's best interest, in fact, that don't exist today.
Okay,
If you're concerned about overall home office or anything in particular you might be concerned about, that section of the
Can I
regulation.
give her some sections to look up?
Yes.
well, I have looked at them and I have
Do
read
you know
them.
which one's there?
But I'm really confused by them. That's why I'm asking the question, and I feel like you're talking around in a circle at me, and you're not actually
Well, the
answering.
purpose of
And I don't mean that
tonight's meeting-
disrespectfully, I just feel like you're not answering anything.
Let me be clear. The purpose of tonight's meeting is not to resolve or address your specific criteria. If you have certain concerns about any section or certain thoughts about the regulations, you're certainly willing to share those with us, and we'll take it under consideration.
So should I write a letter to you guys asking about each of my specific concerns?
Well, what I did say is, if you would like to, you're welcome to come to the land use department. And I'm sure there's someone there who can speak to you about your specific situation.
Okay.
That's always available.
Okay, so I have another question. You're probably not going to answer it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. My son has a commercial vehicle, what you're going to consider maybe a commercial vehicle. He has a flatbed truck. It's his everyday vehicle. He doesn't run a business off of his flatbed truck. We go get hay at the feed store sometimes. Now, by this, it would be considered a commercial vehicle, and we would be limited as to where we can park it. Again, confusing. Recreational vehicles, same thing. I have animals on my property, and all my vehicles and everything are registered with the town. I have a Kubota. Now, it's a question of where can I park it. I have a horse trailer I store hay in. It's always been okay with the town because they know exactly where the couple of places I put it, but by this, there's something in there about a 40-foot setback. Well, there's times I'm going to be in trouble with that, and I put it where I put it so that a big, huge hay truck can get down my little windy cowpath driveway and load it into the trailers. But I'll be in violation if this were to pass, and I understand these are just, this is just a proposal. We talked about the animal paddock, domestic animals, keeping of animals. I guess that all goes together. As I said, my barn, I did go to zoning. He did give me the permit. I did pass. I did everything he said. But by reading everything in here, it seems like I can put my animals in the barn, but they can't walk in and out of the barn into a paddock because then they're in violation or something. So I guess my overall point is this whole thing is very, very concerning. As a 26-year Easton resident, and I moved here for the farming community, I know that places change a little bit, but I'm wondering how people like me would be grandfathered in, or if you're driving all of us out of town and you just don't want all these people that, which I don't think that, I'm saying that on a sarcastic level, but it's the concern that I'm hearing from a lot of people. Thanks.
Got here.
Thanks very much, Rob. Thanks, Rob. Thanks to the Planning and Zoning Commission. My name's John Harris. I'm probably a little more familiar with zoning regs than most people in this room because I've been on the Zoning Board of Appeals for 25 years, and I've been the chairman for 14 years. So, but it's still disconcerting when you get a document that's 130 pages long and you're concerned that there might be some action taken on it. So I would certainly start off by saying, don't take any action on it at this point. We're hearing people are just seeing it for the first time. We have a tremendous problem in this town with communication now. We don't have a newspaper. There are a lot more people interested in this topic than are in this room, and I would bet you it's because they don't even know about it. So if action is going to be taken in the very near future, that's irresponsible, in my opinion. Now, there are some specific things that I can address from a ZBA standpoint. It's not my bigger concern, but for example, I'm very glad that you made the setback 20 feet, for example, for accessory buildings like sheds, that you made it 20 feet for generators, but I didn't see any mention of a propane tank for the generator, so that probably should be in there. Also, there's, when we talk about attic space, in fact, I think we have a case coming up not too far from now on talking about an attic. It talks in several places about habitable space, but it never defines habitable space. And so in an attic where you have a sloped roof, if you look at the state regs, habitable space talks about 5 feet, the area that's 5 feet high, and of that area that's 5 feet, where the wall is 5 feet high, where it meets the ceiling, at least 50% of that is supposed to be 7 feet high. But there's no definition of that. In fact, we seem to conflate habitable space with finished space. They're totally different. If you have an attic like I do, where your knee wall is, that could be very finished. It's certainly not habitable. So that needs to be worked on. That definition is not adequate. So there are some, there are a number of things where probably given more time, I could probably help you out with some wording and things like that. That's not my biggest concern though. I was at the POCD hearing. As I believe Grant said, it was 90-10 against. 90-10 easily. And that was ignored apparently. So I'm just wondering what the purpose of this is. I mean, if you're only looking for input, that's one goal. But people are confused by this. They deserve to have questions answered. You start to answer a few of the questions of the lady with domestic animals. But people come to a meeting like this saying, right, I'm looking at this document. I have a lot of questions. And you guys are the ones who are putting it together. So if you're even close to approving something, you need to be able to answer those questions. Because people don't know what the answers are.
People should be assured that if they have a concern and they allow us to hear it, that we will look into that situation, take it under advisement. So although we're not necessarily answering a direct question tonight, we will take it into consideration. Glenn, that the practice has been is writing feverishly over there. We'll go through everything that is being discussed tonight. We will definitely do that. We will make sure that we look at it in the context of the questions.
I'm glad to hear that. But Glenn was also at the POCD meeting. He was writing feverishly that night too. And everything was ignored from what I can see. In fact, the attitude seems to be, gee, the people that are against this are just the people who are against progress. That's not true at all. People like myself have been around for 40 years, but there are people who have been here a lot less than that, or more than that, who moved to Easton because it's a great place the way it is. And I haven't seen any evidence whatsoever that having somebody meet in in an area different from the village store is going to bring people into Easton. That's somebody's pipe dream. I haven't seen any evidence of that. Instead, what you hear, if you talk to the realtors, people come to Easton for two reasons. They come because of the schools, and they come because of the way the town's personality is. And the reason they don't come is because of taxes. That's our biggest challenge, taxes. And I don't really understand how we've headed down this path. With all due respect to Glenn, he might have seen some great regs in other towns, but I'm not sure how they all apply to Easton. I guess my final comment would be, I'm sorry about that. I've got a few questions related to the central district. The thing that I've been in business all my life. I'm an MBA. I've been in marketing research. I've been in sales. I've been in a lot of business aspects my entire career. One thing that you get a feel for is, does it seem like a certain business can succeed here? And if you have no population, the answer is probably no. And we're talking about putting in a central district where we don't have any people. We don't have the population to support this. So my concern would be, what marketing research are we going to require to prove that a business even has a chance of succeeding in Easton? And who owns that property? If a business fails, then what happens to that piece of property? And I'm not sure of the reason why we're pushing it. I know I've heard this sort of nonsensical stuff, in my opinion, about if we just had a few places for people to meet, which we do have, by the way, but if we just had a few places for people to meet, all of a sudden our cares would go away. People wouldn't want to move to Easton. That makes no sense to me as a business person. People move to Easton if it makes sense from a taxes standpoint, schools, etc. And so I say to myself, well, is it being done for business reasons? So what's our tax return on that? It would take, Andy Ketchler, who was the one who made this statement, it would take 20 businesses. Let me rephrase that. If we had 20 businesses move in, paying $20,000 a year in property taxes, that doesn't impact 1% of our budget. We have a $43 million budget. It doesn't impact, it has zero impact if you have 20 businesses, because we don't get a cut of sales taxes or anything, all we get is property taxes. So it's not financial. So what is the driving force here? So I would urge you to give this time for people to get a lot of input, to digest it, to understand it, for the word to filter out. I know it seems to you guys like it's taking a long time, meeting. Although I'm disappointed to say that no one ever contacted me. And we know what kind of cases get appealed. I could have probably been helpful in those conversations. I wasn't going to go to every single meeting, but it probably would have been helpful for us to say, why don't we see what ZBA's input is? They're the ones who get appealed. So anyway, I slow the train down. There's no reason to rush into this. Thanks very much.
Bill Lindsay, Stonesboro Road. I want to thank you all for your hard work. I'm sure we appreciate it. I have to say, however, that I do not appreciate the results. I'm not going to go through in great detail what's been said, but I would touch on a couple of things. I think we've had great zoning since 1941. That zoning is directed primarily at a residential town. And I'm going to echo some of the prior speakers a little bit. I think people come here for two reasons that I've heard. One is the schools, and one is the rural character of the town. I think that unfortunately what you've done is you've taken with your consultant's assistance what is kind of a stock planning and zoning rules and regulations and tried to engraft them on Easton. And I think you've made a mistake. I think you're favoring potential commercial development, which is, Mr. Harris just pointed out, is not going to really help the town, over what the town is, a unique town. And I know I've had this argument with people before. They say, well, our property values are not doing as well as they could. That's not the job of planning and zoning. That's the job of the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen. In terms of planning and zoning, your job is to keep the town, in my opinion, in a rural character the way it is. I've often referred to Easton as the jewel of Fairfield County. I think you're selling a couple of facets of the jewel with these regulations. I'm especially concerned about the conservation development. I won't go into great detail on it, but I am more concerned about the village district. I'm concerned about that because, as Mr. Harris pointed out, and others have and will point out, the hearings were 90% against it, and yet the Planning and Zoning Commission has it right in there. And I think that it itself is a problem, because so far as I can tell, although it's a little hard with the red dot, and I couldn't bring up your zoning maps on your website, it's a little hard with the red dot to see where it is, but I think you've sort of narrowed it down a little bit. But that makes it even worse, because I believe there is one potential property that would fall within the village district that might now seek to have what I consider to be an improper use made proper. And I think that's spot zoning for the Planning and Zoning Commission. I want to point out, though, that although there are a lot of special permits required for various items under your regulations, in the past, and this is with all due respect to you, when some of the prior zoning boards were in effect, I wouldn't have worried about that. I would have said, okay, they're not going to permit a lot of commercial development. They're not going to permit more intensive development. And with all due respect, I have to say I'm concerned about this Board of Zoning, the Planning and Zoning Commission at this point on special permits. I think a lot could be put in. I think you also need to take a look at some of the people who've already mentioned with respect to your prior non-conforming uses and properties. I think it's not clear, and I think that I know from personal experience, some of the people are questioning, as they do now, whether or not they are now going to be in violation of the regulations. And again, it depends on how you enforce the regulations. And I have to, again, echo some of the prior speakers, that the regulations in this town are not enforced. And I don't necessarily blame planning and zoning for that. That's a financial question. And it hasn't been done. But again, I would urge you to, first of all, take your time in looking at this. I'd also look at some of the definitions. For example, you define a farm as a parcel of land on which agricultural products are grown. Does that mean my garden is a farm in the back of my house? I don't know. In any event, I think also you need to listen to the comments, and I recognize you don't like to, or aren't able to answer, or don't want to answer questions in this format, but I would urge you to take some time after this hearing and not immediately move to adoption, and give people some time to write longer letters to you with respect to the various sub-items in this 136-page document. And again, I thank you for your work. I urge you to figure out a way to get rid of the village district, because it should not be in there. Thanks very much.
You're here tonight?
Dan Panuski?
She's not here, she's coming back.
Dwight Senior, you want here tonight? Or you? You're out.
He's running first.
Good to see you all. Thank you all for your time. Been watching you all on TV. Pretty amazed. Anyways, I'm gonna bounce around. I'm here, Dwight Senior, 56 High Ridge Road. Nobody in this town has built more roads than my family. Nobody in this town has sold more land than my family. On TV, I see your realtor telling you all that everybody she talks to asks, where's the town center? To the realtor, I said, it's on Center Road. It's laid out for 2 dysfunctional miles, but that's the center of town. I speak to people constantly, neutral, just at the pumps. If they're new to town, I'm a personable guy. Half the people move here for the schools, half the people move for the agricultural flair. What concerns me is section 4100, just declaring the district. To me, those are scary words. What also bothers me, 7300, earthwork operations. I recently built a home. I'm still a landowner. I intend to build more homes. I have 5.5 acres on Mill River. I don't want to get in trouble with planning and zoning, but my father was a surveyor, and even though I'm in 1 acre zoning, I know I only get 1 or 2 lots there. Zoning is going to tell me if it's 1 or 2. I have to follow the planning and zoning regs. Everybody should have to follow zoning regs. On earthwork operations, Rob, some guys like to golf on Saturday. I like to scoop with my excavator. That's who I am. I'm not building anything. I'm not constructing anything. I'm like a little kid playing in a puddle waiting for the bus. So I have a huge problem. And being a builder, knowing a lot of builders, when you encumber tons of wet weather, you have to work with Mother Nature to provide you the opportunity. So restricting heavy equipment use on weekends, I think, is something that should be looked into a little longer. It is a lot of information to digest, but on the village district, I'm dead against it. With the tolls coming, I didn't speak at the last meeting because I'd like to get a little more informed. But the incoming tolls, the secondary explosion in traffic that we're going to incur, doing anything to our wonderful town center would just be destroying our town flavor. So I wanted to just say I'm against it this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Wood. Ed, please. Ed.
This Ruby, Bev Daisy, Rennie Road, and I always don't know where to start with this. The lucky gal's gone because I think he'd be bananas. Where I start is in the 1000. Where you lay out your plan in terms of what's your overall vision for our town. I think you say here, you want to protect our property values.